Night slowly falls, and the rain begins to whisper forgotten stories. On this sonic journey, I invite you to discover glimpses of the lives of artists who changed the world. Between light and shadow, between genius and struggle, the voices of the past come to life under the rain. Close your eyes, let yourself be carried by the story. This is Rain Stories. In this episode, we step into the world of Vincent van Gogh, a soul caught between brilliance and turmoil. Let the rain guide you through his story. Prologue. The Flame and the Shadow. In the quiet corners of history, there are lives that burn so brightly they leave an indelible mark on the world. A mark that glows long after the flame has flickered out. Vincent van Gogh was such a life. His story is one of light and shadow, of beauty and despair, of a man who saw the world in colors no one else could imagine, yet lived in a world that often saw him in shades of gray. Vincent was a paradox. He was a dreamer who painted the stars, but often stumbled in the dark. He was a man of profound empathy, who felt the pain of others as if it were his own, yet struggled to find a place where he belonged. He was an artist who created masterpieces that would one day inspire millions. Yet, in his lifetime, he sold only a handful of paintings. His life was a tapestry of contradictions, woven with threads of passion, loneliness, and an unyielding desire to create. This is the story of a man who walked a starry path, a path illuminated by moments of brilliance and shrouded in moments of profound darkness. It is a story of resilience, of a soul who, despite the weight of his struggles, never stopped reaching for the light. Vincent van Gogh's journey was not an easy one, but it was a journey that changed the world. As we step into his world, we will walk beside him through the fields of Provence, where the sunflowers swayed in golden waves. We will stand with him under the swirling skies of Arles, where the stars seemed close enough to touch. We will sit with him in the quiet corners of asylums and the humble rooms of inns, where he poured his heart onto canvas after canvas. And we will witness the moments of triumph and tragedy that defined his life, a life that was as vibrant and complex as the art he left behind. This is not just the story of an artist. It is the story of a man who dared to see the world differently, who dared to feel deeply, and who dared to create even when the world seemed indifferent to his gifts. It is a story of hope, of the enduring power of art, and of the light that can be found even in the darkest of nights. So let us begin, not at the end, where his name is celebrated, but at the beginning, where his journey was just a flicker of possibility, a spark waiting to ignite. Chapter 1. The Seed of Passion. In the small village of Zundert, where the fields stretched to the horizon and the sky seemed to touch the earth, a boy was born who would change the way humanity saw the world. Vincent van Gogh came into the world on March 30th, 1853, into a deeply religious family. His father, Theodorus van Gogh, was a pastor, and his mother, Anna Cornelia Carbentus, was a woman with a profound love for nature and art. Vincent was the first of the family's 6 children, but not the first to bear this name. A year before his birth, his parents had another son, whom they also named Vincent. He died just a few weeks after being born. Thus, Vincent grew up knowing he carried the name of a brother he had never met, a fact that left a deep mark on him. From an early age, Vincent was a sensitive and introspective child. He loved to wander alone through the fields, listening to the wind whistling through the branches and watching the changing colors of the sky at sunset. These solitary walks were his first lessons in art. Gentle and melancholic by nature, Vincent felt more at ease in the company of animals and plants than with people. Often his parents would find him sitting by the riverbank, sketching with a pencil on a piece of paper. His drawings were simple but full of life. Trees that seemed to dance, clouds that looked like monsters, and butterflies flying freely. But Vincent was not an easy child to raise. He had bursts of anger and frustration that he couldn't control. Sometimes he would break into tears for no apparent reason, and other times he would withdraw into himself, refusing to speak to anyone. His parents didn't always understand him, but his younger brother Theo was always by his side. Theo was Vincent's opposite, cheerful, sociable, and balanced. Despite their differences, the two brothers formed an unbreakable bond. Theo was the only one who could calm Vincent when he was overwhelmed by emotions. He loved listening to Vincent talk about colors and shapes, even if he didn't always understand what he was saying. At school, Vincent was not a brilliant student. He enjoyed reading and drawing, but the curriculum bored him. His teachers considered him a difficult pupil, and his classmates avoided him because of his unpredictable temperament. His only solace was the time he spent in nature, where he could be himself. In these moments, Vincent began to see the world differently. It wasn't just a landscape. It was a symphony of colors and emotions. Every leaf, every petal, every ray of sunlight had a story to tell, and Vincent wanted to tell those stories. At the age of 16, Vincent left Zundert to work at the art firm Gogh & CA in The Hague. Here he was exposed to the professional art world for the first time. The galleries were filled with dazzling paintings, idyllic landscapes, solemn portraits, and biblical scenes full of drama. Vincent was fascinated. He would spend hours studying each canvas, trying to understand how the artists managed to capture so much life and emotion on a piece of cloth. But although he enjoyed admiring art, Vincent felt that something was missing. He didn't just want to sell paintings, he wanted to create. In this first chapter, the seed of passion for art was planted in Vincent's heart. But this passion was not without conflict. Vincent felt torn between his family's expectations and his own desire to explore the world through the eyes of an artist. He was a young man full of dreams, but also doubts. And though he didn't know it yet, his life was to be a long and tumultuous journey, with each step bringing him closer to finding his voice. Chapter 2. The Wandering Soul. Vincent's time at Gogh & CA was both a blessing and a curse. The bustling art galleries of The Hague were a far cry from the quiet fields of Zundert, and the young man found himself caught between two worlds. On one hand, he was surrounded by beauty, paintings that spoke of distant lands, heroic figures, and divine inspiration. On the other hand, he was acutely aware of the commercial nature of the art world. The paintings he admired were not just works of art. They were commodities, bought and sold to decorate the homes of the wealthy. Vincent's job at Gogh & CA required him to interact with clients, many of whom were more interested in the price of a painting than its meaning. This frustrated him deeply. He believed that art should inspire, uplift, and transform, not merely serve as a status symbol. His idealism often clashed with the practical demands of his work, and his employers began to notice his lack of enthusiasm. They saw him as a dreamer, someone who couldn't or wouldn't conform to the realities of the business. Despite these struggles, Vincent's time in The Hague was not without its joys. He developed a deep appreciation for the works of the old masters, particularly Rembrandt and Millet. Rembrandt's use of light and shadow fascinated him, while Millet's depictions of peasant life resonated with his own sense of empathy for the poor and downtrodden. Vincent began to sketch in his spare time, trying to capture the essence of what he saw in these masterpieces. His early drawings were rough and unpolished, but they showed a raw talent, a willingness to experiment and push boundaries. In 1873, Vincent was transferred to Goupil and Company's London branch. The move was both exciting and daunting. London was a city of contrasts, a place where opulence and poverty existed side by side. Vincent found himself drawn to the city's working-class neighborhoods, where he would wander for hours, observing the lives of the people who lived there. He was particularly struck by the resilience of the poor, who seemed to find joy and dignity even in the face of hardship. These experiences deepened his sense of social justice and reinforced his belief in the power of art to give voice to the voiceless. But Vincent's time in London was also marked by personal turmoil. He fell in love with his landlady's daughter, Eugénie Lawyer, and for a brief moment he allowed himself to dream of a future filled with happiness and stability. However, his feelings were not reciprocated, and the rejection left him heartbroken. This was the first of many romantic disappointments that would haunt Vincent throughout his life. It also marked the beginning of a downward spiral. He became increasingly withdrawn and disillusioned, struggling to find meaning in his work and his life. In 1875, Vincent was transferred once again, this time to Paris. The city was a hub of artistic innovation, but Vincent's mental state continued to deteriorate. He grew more critical of the art world, accusing it of being shallow and materialistic. His employers, tired of his erratic behavior, eventually dismissed him in 1876. At the age of 23, Vincent found himself adrift, without a job or a clear sense of direction. This period of uncertainty marked the end of Vincent's time in the art trade and the beginning of a new chapter in his life, one defined by a search for purpose and a deepening commitment to his own artistic vision. Little did he know that his wandering soul was about to find its true calling. Chapter 3. The Dark Valley. After his dismissal from Goupil and C, Vincent van Gogh found himself at a crossroads. He was 23 years old, unemployed, and filled with a sense of failure. The art trade, which had once seemed like a gateway to a world of beauty and inspiration, now felt hollow and meaningless. Vincent's heart was heavy with questions. What was his purpose? Where did he belong? And how could he make a difference in a world that seemed so indifferent to suffering? It was during this time of uncertainty that Vincent turned to religion. His father was a pastor, and his upbringing had been steeped in the teachings of the Bible. Vincent had always been drawn to the idea of serving others, and now, in his darkest hour, he saw the church as a beacon of hope. He decided to follow in his father's footsteps and become a preacher. In 1877, Vincent moved to Amsterdam to study theology. He threw himself into his studies with the same intensity that he had once reserved for art. He learned Greek and Latin, pored over religious texts, and spent hours in prayer. But despite his efforts, Vincent struggled to fit into the rigid structure of formal education. His teachers found him too passionate, too unconventional. They questioned his ability to conform to the expectations of the church. Vincent, in turn, grew frustrated with what he saw as their lack of compassion and understanding. After a year of struggling, Vincent abandoned his studies in Amsterdam, but he didn't give up on his dream of serving God. Instead, he decided to take a different path, one that would bring him closer to the people he felt called to help. In 1878, he traveled to the Borinage, a coal mining region in southern Belgium. The Borinage was a place of grinding poverty and hardship, where men, women, and children toiled in the mines for meager wages. It was here, among the soot-covered faces and calloused hands of the miners, that Vincent hoped to find his purpose. Vincent's time in the Borinage was both transformative and devastating. He lived in a small, drafty hut, sharing the meager rations of the miners. He gave away his clothes, his money, and even his bed to those in need. He preached in makeshift churches and visited the sick and dying, offering words of comfort and hope. But despite his efforts, Vincent's idealism clashed with the harsh realities of life in the Borinage. The miners were skeptical of this strange, intense young man who spoke of God's love but seemed to have so little to offer in practical terms. The church authorities were equally unimpressed. They saw Vincent's extreme acts of self-sacrifice as reckless and misguided. When his contract as a lay preacher was not renewed, Vincent was devastated. He had given everything, his time, his energy, his possessions, and yet he had failed. The rejection left him feeling more lost and alone than ever. It was during this period of despair that Vincent began to draw. At first, it was a way to cope with his emotions, to make sense of the world around him. He sketched the miners and their families, capturing their weary faces and hunched shoulders. He drew the bleak landscapes of the Borinage, the slag heaps, the barren fields, the grey skies. These early drawings were raw and unpolished, but they were filled with a sense of empathy and humanity. Through his art, Vincent found a way to connect with the people he had come to love. In 1880, Vincent made a decision that would change the course of his life. He wrote to his brother Theo, who had always been his closest confidant, and shared his newfound passion for art. "I am seeking, I am striving, I am in it with all my heart," he wrote. Vincent realized that he could serve God and humanity not through preaching, but through his art. He saw his drawings and paintings as a way to give voice to the voiceless, to shine a light on the struggles and dignity of the poor. Theo, who had always believed in Vincent's talent, encouraged him to pursue this path. He sent him money for art supplies and urged him to keep working, even when the road ahead seemed uncertain. With Theo's support, Vincent began to see himself not as a failure, but as an artist in the making. The Borinage had been a dark valley in Vincent's life, but it was also a place of profound transformation. It was here, in the depths of despair, that he found his true calling. Art became his salvation, his way of making sense of the world and his place in it. And though the road ahead would be long and difficult, Vincent was ready to take the first step. Chapter 4. The Awakening. Vincent's decision to become an artist was not just a career change, it was a rebirth. After the crushing disappointment of his failed attempts at preaching and the emotional toll of his time in the Borinage, Vincent found solace in the act of creation. Art became his refuge, his language, and his purpose. But the road to becoming an artist was far from smooth. Vincent was 27 years old, with no formal training, no money, and no connections in the art world. What he did have, however, was an unshakable determination and the unwavering support of his brother Theo. Theo, who had recently taken a position at Goupil and Scie in Paris, became Vincent's lifeline. He sent him money for art supplies, encouraged him to keep working, and introduced him to the works of contemporary artists. Vincent's early drawings were rough and unpolished, but they showed a raw intensity, a willingness to experiment and push boundaries. He copied works by the old masters, such as Rembrandt and Millet, and practiced sketching from life. His subjects were often the poor and downtrodden, miners, peasants, and labourers, people who, like Vincent, lived on the margins of society. In 1881, Vincent moved to The Hague to study under his cousin-in-law, Anton Mauve, a successful artist who specialized in pastoral scenes. Mauve taught Vincent the basics of watercolor and oil painting, but their relationship was fraught with tension. Vincent's stubbornness and refusal to conform to traditional methods frustrated Mauve, while Vincent felt misunderstood and stifled by his mentor's expectations. "I would rather die of passion than of boredom," Vincent once declared, and this sentiment defined his approach to art. During this time, Vincent's personal life was marked by turmoil. He fell in love with his cousin, Guy Vos Stricker, who rejected his advances. Heartbroken and desperate, Vincent famously held his hand over a flame, declaring, "Let me see her for as long as I can keep my hand in the fire." This dramatic gesture was a reflection of Vincent's intense emotions and his inability to handle rejection. It also foreshadowed the mental struggles that would plague him throughout his life. In 1883, Vincent moved to the rural village of Nieuwennen, where his parents had relocated. Here, he immersed himself in the lives of the local peasants, drawing inspiration from their daily struggles. His works from this period, such as The Potato Eaters, are dark and somber, reflecting the harsh realities of rural life. Vincent wanted to show the dignity and resilience of the working class, even in the face of poverty and hardship. I have tried to emphasize that these people, eating their potatoes in the lamplight, have dug the earth with those very hands they put in the dish, he wrote to Theo. Despite his growing skill and vision, Vincent's time in Nieuwennen was not without conflict. His relationship with his parents was strained, and his unconventional lifestyle often drew criticism from the villagers. Yet, Vincent remained focused on his art, producing hundreds of drawings and paintings during his 2 years in Nieuwennen. It was here that he began to develop his unique style, a style characterized by bold lines, dramatic contrasts, and a deep emotional resonance. In 1886, Vincent made a decision that would change the course of his artistic career. He moved to Paris to live with Theo, who was now working as an art dealer. Paris was the center of the art world, a city buzzing with creativity and innovation. For Vincent, it was both exhilarating and overwhelming. He was exposed to the works of the Impressionists, artists like Claude Monet, Edgar Degas, and Camille Pissarro, who were revolutionizing the art world with their use of light, color, and brushwork. Vincent's time in Paris was a period of intense experimentation. He began to incorporate the bright, vibrant colors of the Impressionists into his own work, moving away from the dark, earthy tones of his earlier paintings. He also experimented with new techniques, such as pointillism, which involved applying small dots of color to create a sense of movement and light. Vincent's palette became lighter and more varied, reflecting his growing confidence and his desire to capture the beauty and energy of the world around him. But Paris was not just a place of artistic growth for Vincent. It was also a place of personal struggle. The fast-paced, competitive environment of the city often left him feeling isolated and overwhelmed. He struggled to make friends and often felt like an outsider in the art world. Yet, despite these challenges, Vincent continued to push himself, producing a remarkable body of work during his 2 years in Paris. One of the most significant relationships Vincent formed during this time was with fellow artist Paul Gauguin. The two men shared a passion for art and a desire to break free from the constraints of traditional painting. They spent hours discussing their ideas and philosophies, challenging each other to think differently about art and life. But their relationship was also fraught with tension, as both men were strong-willed and opinionated. This tension would later come to a head during their time together in Arles. By the end of his time in Paris, Vincent had undergone a profound transformation. He had moved away from the dark, somber tones of his early work and embraced a brighter, more vibrant palette. He had developed his own unique style, one that combined the emotional intensity of his earlier work with the technical innovations of the Impressionists, and he had found a sense of purpose and direction in his art. But Vincent's journey was far from over. In 1888, he left Paris for the south of France, seeking the light and color that would inspire some of his most famous works. It was a decision that would lead to both triumph and tragedy as Vincent's starry path continued to unfold. Chapter 5. The Colors of the South. In February 1888, Vincent van Gogh boarded a train to Arles, a small town in the Provence region of southern France. He was seeking something he couldn't quite name but felt deep in his soul. Paris, with its bustling streets and competitive art scene, had exhausted him. He longed for simplicity, for light, for color, and he believed he would find it in the south. When Vincent arrived in Arles, he was immediately captivated. The landscape was unlike anything he had ever seen. The sun was brighter, the skies were bluer, and the fields seemed to stretch on forever, dotted with golden wheat and vibrant wildflowers. The light in Provence was different, sharp and clear, casting long shadows and illuminating everything with a brilliance that made the world feel alive. For Vincent, it was a revelation. The whole future of art is to be found in the south, he wrote to Theo. Vincent rented a small yellow house on Place Lamartine, which he called the Yellow House. It was a modest space, but to Vincent it was a sanctuary. He painted the walls a cheerful yellow and filled the rooms with simple furniture. He dreamed of turning the house into an artist's commune, a place where like-minded painters could live and work together, sharing ideas and inspiration. He called it the Studio of the South. In Arles, Vincent's art underwent a dramatic transformation. The somber, earthy tones of his earlier work gave way to a riot of color. He painted sunflowers, their golden petals glowing against vibrant blue backgrounds. He painted orchards in bloom, the pink and white blossoms bursting with life. He painted the Rhone River at night, the stars twinkling like diamonds in the indigo sky. Everywhere he looked, Vincent saw beauty, and he poured that beauty onto his canvases with a feverish intensity. One of Vincent's most famous works from this period is The Night Café, a haunting depiction of a local cafe bathed in harsh, artificial light. The painting is filled with tension. The red walls clash with the green ceiling, and the figures in the room seem isolated and lonely. Vincent described it as a place where one can ruin oneself, go mad, or commit a crime. It was a stark contrast to the vibrant landscapes he painted during the day, but it reflected the duality of Vincent's world, the beauty and the darkness, the light and the shadow. Vincent's productivity during this time was staggering. He often worked from sunrise to sunset, sometimes completing a painting in a single day. He wrote to Theo, "I am in a fury of work, for the trees are in blossom, and I want to paint a Provençal orchard of astounding gaiety." His letters to Theo were filled with excitement and passion as he described his progress and shared his dreams for the future. But Vincent's dream of an artist's commune was not easy to realize. He invited several artists to join him in Arles, but only one accepted: Paul Gauguin. Gauguin was a bold and unconventional painter, known for his use of color and his interest in primitive art. Vincent admired him greatly and believed that their collaboration would lead to something extraordinary. "Gauguin and I will do great things together," he wrote to Theo. When Gauguin arrived in October 1888, the two men threw themselves into their work. They painted side by side, exchanged ideas, and challenged each other to push the boundaries of their art. For a time, it was a fruitful partnership. Gauguin's influence can be seen in Vincent's work from this period, particularly in his use of bold outlines and flattened perspectives. Together, they explored new techniques and styles, each pushing the other to new heights of creativity. But tensions soon began to rise. Gauguin was strong-willed and critical, while Vincent was sensitive and volatile. They clashed over everything: art, philosophy, even the way they arranged their furniture. Gauguin found Vincent's intensity exhausting, while Vincent felt misunderstood and unappreciated. "Gauguin and I understand each other fundamentally," Vincent wrote to Theo, "but there are moments when we are like fire and water." The breaking point came on December 23rd, 1888. After a particularly heated argument, Vincent suffered a mental breakdown. In a fit of despair, he cut off part of his ear with a razor. He wrapped the ear in a piece of cloth and gave it to a woman at a local brothel, telling her to keep this object carefully. The exact details of what happened that night remain unclear, but the incident marked the beginning of a downward spiral for Vincent. Gauguin left Arles shortly after the incident, and Vincent was hospitalized. When he returned to the Yellow House, he found it empty and lifeless. The dream of the studio of the South was over, but even in the midst of his despair, Vincent continued to paint. He created some of his most iconic works during this period, including Self-Portrait with Bandaged Ear and Starry Night over the Rhone. These paintings are filled with emotion, pain, loneliness, but also a glimmer of hope. Vincent's time in Arles was a period of both triumph and tragedy. He had found the light and color he had been searching for, But he had also faced the darkest corners of his own mind. Yet, through it all, he never lost his passion for art. "I am seeking, I am striving, I am in it with all my heart," he had written to Theo years earlier. And in Arles, that striving reached its peak. Chapter 6. The Breaking Point, 1888 to 1889. The winter of 1888 was a turning point in Vincent van Gogh's life. The incident in which he cut off part of his ear marked the beginning of a series of mental breakdowns that would plague him for the rest of his days. After Gauguin left Arles, Vincent was hospitalized, and the townspeople began to view him with suspicion and fear. They signed a petition to have him removed from the Yellow House, calling him a danger to the community. Vincent, already fragile and isolated, felt the weight of their rejection deeply. In May 1889, Vincent made the difficult decision to admit himself to the Saint-Paul-de-Mosole Asylum in Saint-Rémy-de-Provence. The asylum was located in a former monastery, surrounded by fields of wheat and olive groves. It was a place of both confinement and refuge, where Vincent hoped to find peace and stability. "I am not strictly speaking mad," he wrote to Theo, "for my mind is absolutely normal in the intervals, and even more so than before. But during the attacks it is terrible, and then I lose consciousness of everything." Life in the asylum was regimented and monotonous. The patients followed a strict schedule with little opportunity for creativity or self-expression. But Vincent was determined to continue painting, with the support of the asylum's director, Dr. Théophile Perron. He was given a small studio and allowed to work outdoors under supervision. The landscape around Saint-Rémy became his muse, and he poured his emotions into his art with a fervor that bordered on obsession. During his time at the asylum, Vincent produced some of his most iconic works. He painted the view from his window, a field of wheat with the sun rising above it, the sky swirling with clouds. He painted the olive groves, their twisted trunks and silvery leaves shimmering in the light. And he painted the asylum's garden, filled with irises and roses, their colors vibrant and alive. These paintings were not just depictions of the world around him. They were expressions of his inner state, his hopes, his fears, his longing for connection. One of Vincent's most famous works from this period is The Starry Night. Painted in June 1889, the painting depicts the view from his window at night, with the sky filled with swirling stars and a crescent moon. The village below is quiet and still, but the sky is alive with movement and energy. The cypress tree in the foreground reaches upward, like a flame stretching toward the heavens. The Starry Night is a masterpiece of emotion and imagination, a reflection of Vincent's turbulent mind and his yearning for something beyond the confines of his reality. But Vincent's time at the asylum was not without its challenges. He suffered from hallucinations, delusions, and episodes of intense anxiety. He often felt trapped, both by the walls of the asylum and by his own mind. "I feel a prisoner in this hospital," he wrote to Theo. Yet, even in his darkest moments, Vincent found solace in his art. "The only thing that keeps me going is the work," he confessed. "It distracts me. It consoles me. It gives me a reason to live." Vincent's relationship with Theo remained a source of strength and support. Theo continued to send him money for art supplies and encouraged him to keep working. He also introduced Vincent's art to the Parisian art world, organizing exhibitions and connecting him with other artists. But despite Theo's efforts, Vincent's work was largely ignored or dismissed by the art establishment. He sold only a handful of paintings during his lifetime, and his genius was not recognized until after his death. In May 1890, after a year at the asylum, Vincent decided to leave Saint-Rémy. He felt that he had reached a point of stability and was eager to start a new chapter in his life. He moved to Auvers-sur-Oise, a small village north of Paris, where he would spend the final months of his life. Chapter 7. The Final Strokes. In May 1890, Vincent van Gogh left the asylum at Saint-Rémy and travelled to Auvers-sur-Oise, a quiet village about 20 miles north of Paris. Theo had suggested the move, believing that the peaceful countryside and the care of Dr. Paul Gachet, a homeopathic physician and amateur artist, would be good for Vincent's health. Dr. Gachet was known for treating artists, and Theo hoped he could provide the support Vincent needed. When Vincent arrived in Auvers, he was struck by its beauty. The village was nestled in a valley with rolling hills, thatched cottages, and fields of wheat stretching as far as the eye could see. The landscape was softer and more subdued than the vibrant colors of Provence, but it had a quiet charm that Vincent found comforting. He rented a small room at the Auberge Ravoux, a modest inn, and set up his easel in the garden. Vincent's time in Auvers was marked by an extraordinary burst of creativity. In just 70 days, he produced over 70 paintings, a staggering output that reflected both his passion and his sense of urgency. He painted the village's streets, its churches, and its gardens. He painted portraits of Dr. Gachet, capturing the doctor's melancholic expression with striking honesty. And he painted the fields of wheat, their golden stalks swaying in the wind under vast, expressive skies. One of Vincent's most famous works from this period is Wheatfield with Crows. The painting depicts a stormy sky filled with crows, their dark forms swooping over a field of wheat. The path in the foreground leads nowhere, creating a sense of unease and uncertainty. Many have interpreted this painting as a reflection of Vincent's inner turmoil, a premonition of the end that was drawing near. Despite his productivity, Vincent's mental state remained fragile. He continued to suffer from bouts of depression and anxiety, and he often felt isolated and misunderstood. His relationship with Dr. Gachet was complicated. While the doctor was sympathetic to Vincent's struggles, he was also eccentric and unpredictable, and Vincent sometimes doubted his ability to help. "I think we must not count on Dr. Gachet at all," Vincent wrote to Theo. "First of all, he is sicker than I am, I think. Or shall we say, just as much." Vincent's letters to Theo during this period reveal a man grappling with profound loneliness and despair. He wrote about his struggles with money, his fears for the future, and his longing for recognition as an artist. "I feel a failure," he confessed in one letter. "I feel that everything I has done is worthless." Yet, even in his darkest moments, Vincent clung to his art as a source of meaning and purpose. "The only thing that keeps me going is the work," he wrote. "It distracts me, it consoles me, it gives me a reason to live." On July 27, 1890, Vincent went out to paint in the fields as usual, but this time he carried a revolver with him. No one knows exactly what happened that day, but at some point Vincent shot himself in the chest. He managed to stagger back to the Auberge Ravou, where he collapsed in his room. The innkeeper, alarmed by Vincent's condition, called for Dr. Gachet. When Theo arrived the next day, he found Vincent lying in bed, weak but conscious. The brothers spent the day together, talking and reminiscing. Vincent seemed at peace, but his wounds were too severe to heal. He died in the early hours of July 29th, 1890, with Theo by his side. He was 37 years old. Vincent's death was a devastating blow to Theo, who had been his brother's greatest supporter and confidant. Theo wrote to their sister Elizabeth, "He was my own brother, and the best friend I ever had." But Theo's grief was compounded by his own failing health. He died just 6 months later, at the age of 33, and was buried beside Vincent in the cemetery at Auvers-sur-Oise. Chapter 8. Van Gogh in the present tense. How a painter from the past shapes the modern soul. More than a century after his death, Vincent van Gogh remains one of the most beloved and influential artists in the world. His name has transcended the confines of art history to become a universal symbol of passion, emotional depth, and artistic innovation. What makes Van Gogh so significant today is not just the technical mastery of his work or the tragic arc of his life, but the way in which his legacy continues to touch lives across the globe. In a contemporary world that often feels disjointed and chaotic, Van Gogh's art offers a powerful reminder of the beauty and intensity of human emotion, of the value of authenticity, and of the ability of one person's vision to ripple outward into culture, psychology, education, and everyday life. Today, Van Gogh's most famous paintings are spread across the globe, housed in the world's most prestigious museums. The Van Gogh Museum in Amsterdam holds the largest collection of his works, including masterpieces like The Potato Eaters, Sunflowers, and Almond Blossoms. In New York's Museum of Modern Art, visitors flock daily to view The Starry Night, perhaps his most iconic painting, which seems to shimmer with an almost supernatural energy. The Bedroom, housed in the Art Institute of Chicago, and Irises in the J. Paul Getty Museum in Los Angeles are just two other examples of how his works have become cornerstones of major collections. These paintings are no longer just works of art, they are destinations in themselves, drawing millions of viewers each year who are eager to stand before them and experience their emotional weight firsthand. But Van Gogh's presence today extends far beyond museum walls. His influence is found in immersive digital exhibitions that allow audiences to step inside his swirling skies and golden fields. These shows, often held in massive warehouse-style venues, use projection and sound to create a fully enveloping environment that brings Van Gogh's vision to life in a way that's both modern and emotionally powerful. These experiences attract diverse audiences, many of whom may not be traditional museum goers, proving that Van Gogh's appeal is as universal as it is enduring. They reflect how his work, filled with movement and feeling, adapts naturally to digital media and continues to speak to a 21st century sensibility. The emotional depth of Van Gogh's paintings is part of what keeps them so relevant. At a time when conversations around mental health are more open and urgent than ever, Van Gogh serves as a poignant figure of empathy and resilience. He lived much of his life in isolation, struggling with what would likely be diagnosed today as a combination of depression, anxiety, and possibly bipolar disorder. Yet from these personal struggles emerge paintings of staggering vibrancy and life. His canvases, whether filled with the energy of a cypress tree twisting toward a star-filled sky, or the quiet melancholy of an empty chair, convey a rawness and honesty that resonate with viewers who may be navigating their own internal battles. In this way, Van Gogh has become a kind of emotional mirror for modern audiences, proof that beauty and vulnerability are not opposites, but often deeply intertwined. This emotional connection also feeds into his widespread cultural impact. Van Gogh has inspired countless artists, from painters and sculptors to filmmakers, musicians and writers. His influence can be felt in everything from the swirling compositions of abstract expressionism to the confessional intimacy of singer-songwriter lyrics. The song Vincent by Don McLean, often subtitled Starry, Starry Night, remains a heartfelt tribute to the man behind the masterpieces, capturing the sorrow of a misunderstood genius and bringing his story to new listeners. Filmmakers, too, have returned again and again to Van Gogh's life, exploring his torment and brilliance in biopics like Lust for Life and the visually arresty animated feature Loving Vincent, which was the first fully painted film of its kind. Meanwhile, his art continues to be reimagined in fashion and design, from runway collections inspired by sunflowers to home decor that borrows the vivid palettes and flowing lines of his landscapes. Van Gogh's aesthetic is woven into the fabric of contemporary life. These reinterpretations keep his work fresh and dynamic, inviting people to engage with his vision in both everyday and extraordinary ways. At the same time, the commercial presence of his art poses questions about how we consume beauty and the tension between artistic integrity and popular appeal, issues that Van Gogh himself might have found deeply ironic, given that he sold only one painting during his lifetime. Educationally, Van Gogh's impact is profound. His work is studied not only in art history classes, but also in disciplines ranging from psychology to literature and cultural studies. His letters, particularly those to his brother Theo, are considered literary documents in their own right, offering insight into the mind of a man who thought deeply about art, humanity, and his own purpose. These writings are not just historically significant, they are emotionally stirring, filled with moments of clarity, despair, and hope. Teachers around the world use them to connect students with the idea that art is not only about technique, but also about feeling, perspective, and the courage to express one's truth. For many people today, Van Gogh represents the ultimate outsider artist, someone who followed his vision to the very end, regardless of public opinion or personal cost. His story is often interpreted as one of tragic genius, but there's more to it than that. It's also a story of perseverance, of a relentless quest to capture the beauty of the world despite overwhelming odds. That narrative continues to inspire countless individuals, not just artists, but anyone who has ever felt unseen, unheard, or misunderstood. In a society that often values perfection and productivity, Van Gogh reminds us that there is also immense value in vulnerability, introspection, and imperfection. In this sense, Van Gogh is more than just a historical figure. He is a cultural and emotional touchstone. His art and story offer a language for feelings that are often difficult to articulate, a way to connect with the parts of ourselves that are wounded or wondering. He helps us see the world more vividly, feel more deeply, and perhaps most importantly, remember that even in the darkest of times, there is still beauty to be found. As we continue to grapple with global uncertainty, environmental anxiety, and the complexities of digital life, Van Gogh's work offers a kind of grounding, a reminder of the natural world, of human connection, and of the timeless struggle to find meaning through creation. Whether viewed in a quiet gallery, projected onto towering walls, or stitched into the fabric of everyday life, his paintings continue to inspire, challenge, and comfort. Vincent van Gogh may have died without knowing the impact he would have, but today his vision endures more vividly than ever. He is not just a painter from the past, he is a presence in our present, coloring how we see, feel, and imagine the world around us. Chapter 9. The World on Canvas and Paper. Vincent van Gogh's Letters. In the small, sun-drenched studio in Arles, where the air smelled of turpentine and freshly squeezed paint, Vincent van Gogh dipped his pen in ink and wrote with a trembling hand, "Painting is the only language I truly speak." These words, penned in an 1888 letter to Theo, were not merely a confession. They were the key to understanding his entire body of work. Vincent's letters, over 800 pages of raw emotion, artistic revelation, and desperate hope, offer us something his paintings alone cannot: a direct line into the mind of a man who saw the world differently, who felt it more intensely, and who transformed his suffering into beauty. To read Vincent's letters is to walk beside him as he paints. We see not just the finished masterpieces, the swirling skies, the burning sunflowers, but the thoughts that birthed them. His words reveal a mind constantly at work, wrestling with color, light, and meaning. "I want to use color to express something beyond the literal," he wrote. And indeed, his paintings are not mere representations of reality, but emotional landscapes where yellow does not simply depict sunlight. It radiates joy, defiance, a fragile hope against the darkness he so often felt. Take, for example, the starry night. To the casual observer, it is a dreamlike vision of a village under a turbulent sky. But Vincent's letters pull back the curtain. In the summer of 1889, from the asylum at Saint-Rémy, he described the view from his window. "This morning, long before sunrise, I saw the countryside with only the morning star, which looked enormous. The sky was just beginning to lighten, no color yet, only the silhouette of the trees against the coming dawn. This was no passive observation, it was a moment of communion." When he painted the night sky as a living, churning force, he was not exaggerating. He was painting his night, the one that haunted him during bouts of insomnia and mental anguish. His obsession with color was not just aesthetic, but deeply personal. In his letters, yellow is not a pigment, but a lifeline. "Oh, the beautiful midsummer yellow," he exclaimed to Theo. "The sun, a light I can only describe as yellow, bright sulfur yellow, pale lemon gold. How beautiful yellow is." When he painted sunflowers, he was not merely arranging flowers in a vase. He was constructing a fortress of light, willing himself to believe in happiness even as his mind betrayed him. The thick impasto strokes were not just technique, they were urgency, as if he feared the light might slip away if he did not capture it fast enough. And then there are the quieter, more haunting revelations. In the bedroom at Arles, the walls tilt unnaturally. The furniture seems to slide away, and the colors clash. A red blanket against a green door, a blue washstand beside a yellow chair. At first glance, it appears almost childlike. But his letters explain. This time, it's simply my bedroom. I wanted to express absolute repose. The shadows are suppressed. It's painted in flat tints, like Japanese prints. The skewed perspective was not a mistake, but a deliberate choice, a visual echo of his own unsettled mind. The room was his sanctuary, yet even there, the world felt unstable. Vincent's letters also expose the painful gap between his vision and the world's reception. He sold only one painting in his lifetime, and his work was often met with indifference or ridicule. Yet his faith in art never wavered. "What am I in the eyes of most people?" he wrote. "A nonentity, an eccentric, or an unpleasant person? Very well. But if my work is ever recognized, they will see that it was not the work of a madman, but of a man who saw deeper than others." This tension between despair and conviction runs like a current through his correspondence. In his final months, Vincent painted wheat fields, endless, golden, alive with movement. But his letters reveal the duality of these scenes. "The wheat fields are an ocean of gold," he wrote, marveling at their beauty. Yet in Wheatfield with Crows, the sky is a suffocating indigo. The path leads nowhere, and the birds are not just birds, they are omens. Even here, at the edge of his life, Vincent's art held both wonder and terror. His last letter to Theo, unfinished, ends mid-sentence. "Well, the truth is, we can only make our pictures speak." That abrupt silence is perhaps the most poignant testament of all. Vincent's paintings do speak, but his letters teach us how to listen. They remind us that art is not just what we see on the canvas, but the life behind it. The struggles, the obsessions, the unshakable belief that beauty matters, even when the world refuses to see it. Today, in museums around the world, crowds stand in awe before the starry night or sunflowers. But to truly understand Vincent van Gogh, we must also read his words. For in those pages, we find not just the artist, but the man, flawed, relentless, and endlessly alive. Epilogue. The Eternal Starry Night. Vincent van Gogh's life was a testament to the power of art and the resilience of the human spirit. In his short but prolific career, he created over 2,000 works of art, paintings, drawings, and sketches that captured the beauty and complexity of the world around him. Yet, during his lifetime, Vincent's genius went largely unrecognized. He sold only a handful of paintings and struggled with poverty, rejection, and mental illness. But Vincent's legacy endures. Today, he is celebrated as one of the greatest artists of all time, a visionary who transformed the way we see the world. His bold use of color, his expressive brushwork, and his ability to convey emotion through his art have inspired countless artists and touched the hearts of millions. Vincent's life was not an easy one, but it was a life lived with passion and purpose. He once wrote, "I am seeking, I am striving, I am in it with all my heart." And in the end, that is what matters most. Not the recognition or the success, but the courage to keep going, to keep creating, even in the face of adversity. As we look at Vincent's paintings, the sunflowers, the starry nights, the fields of wheat, we see not just the world as he saw it, but the world as he felt it. We see his joy, his pain, his hope, and his despair. And we are reminded that art has the power to transcend time and space, to connect us with the deepest parts of ourselves and with each other. Vincent van Gogh's starry path may have been fraught with darkness, but it was also illuminated by moments of extraordinary light. And in that light, we find a message of hope, a reminder that even in our darkest moments,